Hey everybody, welcome to your TolkienGay, aka Seth. Here we're going to talk about Midnight Sun. Specifically chapters 19 and 20 because we don't got time to finish this whole book with a review. I don't want to put you through that. I don't want to go through that. It's bad enough that I'm having to read this. It's a lot.
Yeah.
I don't want to say anything bad about Stephanie Meyer. I'm sure she is a great human.
We don't know.
Anything I say today is specifically just about this piece of book. This piece of book. Not anything about her personally. To be fair, we actually like Twilight.
We do like Twilight.
We can.
But as y'all say, Balke and Emily, which hi, they're there. It's got good bones. It's got good bones.
It got good bones.
Yeah.
Good bones, bad flesh. The saying that I always say.
The flesh is, and in Midnight Sun, the flesh is rotting.
It's truly rotten.
What we're covering, by the way, is chapter 19 and 20, right after Edward put Bella to sleep for the first time. They were spooning or whatever they're doing. And he's just staring at her, and eventually she says, Edward, I love you. We're going to pick it up from there, where Edward is listening into Bella as she says, I love you a bunch of times. And then he eventually decides to go back home and tell his family that, Bella is it. She's the one. I'm going to take her here to meet y'all. Rosalie, don't kill her. And Rosalie's but she's, this evil person, or in Edward's mind, Rosalie is just this horrible villain, which justice for Rosalie. Come on.
Yeah.
And so they talk, and we figure out that Rosalie is just pretty much worried that Bella will lose the humanity that she never got to experience. And that's where her anger comes from, which I feel is justified. Edward is kind of getting it, but is also just kind of being a jerk about it. Back to Bella's house.
She's his home now, so.
That's where the heart is.
My life now.
And he watches her sleep from the rocking chair, which I'm still very upset about that was not in the movie. And then
You're upset that it wasn't in the movie?
Imagine Arpat in a rocking chair just going.
I don't like that.
All I wanted.
That's
I just
so
want
funny.
a rocking chair. There's no rocking chair. Eventually, Bella wakes up, and they go have breakfast. Well, Bella has breakfast. She makes fun of Edward because she's like, oh, don't eat me. And then he's like, that's not funny. And then they laugh about it a little bit, and she eats cereal. And she makes a big deal about that.
Right.
And then Edward decides that they're going to meet the parents. And now they are boyfriend and girlfriend. And Bella's like, we are? Okay. Yeah, I want this too. Let's do it. And then they go and they meet the family, and Bella listens to Edward playing the piano, and then they listen to all of Carlisle's life story, and we hear a bunch of Edward's thoughts, and it ends right before they decide to go play baseball. That's just the bones of the bones there.
I want to jump in real quick. Just a note on the pacing in this book. It's laid out in such a way that you spent approximately 2 minutes on chapter 19 and about 7 seconds on chapter 20. That's the pacing we're working here, folks.
There is no pacing in this book. There's no pacing. This is the rambling delusions of a madman. Okay, I'm also currently reading Dracula, and Dracula, a great novel, whatever, but it does suffer from old literature where there's just a lot of needless descriptions. It kind of will drag on at times. This is still more incoherent.
Yeah.
By a long shot.
Because Stephanie thinks, for some reason, she set up that vampires can think a million miles a second or whatever, think a bunch of stuff. And so I'm guessing that she assumes that since that's the case, Edward has to think about stuff all the time. And that's basically the whole book, is just Edward thinking about everything and being super repetitive and doubting himself, and then being afraid, and then running away, and then going back. And it's super wishy-washy, 17-year-old immortal that he is, but way overdoes it. Stephanie needs to take a chill pill and relax.
This book reminds me a lot of like the fifth Harry Potter book. Thankfully though, there's plot that like we do not spend 7 whole books in this version of Harry's head. 1, 2, it's not just all in his head. And 3, there is plot that's like moving this along. And I think that's what makes this even more unbearable is that there's no like excitement of like, where is this angst going to go? Are they going to end up together? No, we already know it's spoiled. And then Stephanie is like, well, we're not changing anything. It matches up perfectly, like text and whatnot. And so then everything just feels forced in, and you're spending over 650 pages in a teen boy's head who thinks that he's always right about everything. Ugh. It's uninteresting. Like, even when he's supposedly doubting Bella's affection for him, he is acting as if she has already confirmed his affection for him. Because he will constantly say, whenever she says no, and then she'll kind of be like, maybe this is a boundary, and he'll be like, she doesn't really mean that.
Edward is always right, obviously. It's so frustrating.
650 pages of just a savior complex, really.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yes.
And like he goes randomly into like stories from his past, which we'll get into as we talk about these chapters. And some of them are just like sprinkled in because like they need something else, or else it's just Twilight again, which I would be okay with. I would rather just read chunks of Twilight again, tweaked a little bit, and then just get on with it. And then when Edward has to say something new, he says it. But like, I don't need to know about like the 8th person he killed one time that he kind of feels bad about, but not really feels bad about.
Make it matter. Like, if you're going to add it, make it matter. Make it affect the plot.
This is the opposite of Chekhov's gun. This entire book.
There's so much fluff in this. And I wish there's a way to write this in which you discover new things that make you think differently about Twilight, things that directly affect the plot of Twilight. And that doesn't really exist here.
This isn't fluff because it's worse. Because guess what? I love love. Give it to me on a platter. I would eat that up. But instead, you get the whole meadow scene and you find out that it wasn't just like love and flowers in a field. You find out that it was this dark, scary thing, which that would be a very interesting story because this is very high stakes and dangerous, and it's vampires. But the story that Stephanie set up from the beginning, when we're in Bella's head in Twilight, is that she knows without a shadow of a doubt that the vampires are good and they're not actually going to hurt her. And this is just a love story.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm in. So then you cannot introduce an entirely new perspective on this story where it's doom and gloom and it was this dark and dangerous thing the whole time. It doesn't feel like reading the same story.
Yeah. See, I recently read Twilight for the first time and then immediately jumped into this, and I still feel cheated.
Yeah.
It's not great. So beginning of chapter 19 is actually where the title of this video is going to come from. And it really poses a question. If you say I love you in your sleep, does it count? Because Bella like flat out says, Edward, I love you when she's dreaming. And Edward like takes it to heart, like this is it. Which like we all know that Bella loves Edward. Like, sure, whatever. It's true. But like to take that part of like such an intimate moment away from Bella, like not having the consciousness of actually getting to say I love you to Edward for the first time, and him still getting that, and then him acting upon it, feels just like really manipulative in a way, and just like a kind of like a misuse of power. Wait until she says it. Like, you can't read her mind for a reason. Let it be.
Right.
Does
it count?
No.
It's almost like you just shouldn't watch people while they sleep for months at a time.
Almost. That's crazy that you said that.
It's almost like you just shouldn't do that, you know, like, especially without their permission. In this particular instance, she knows about it, but she's also very clearly uncomfortable on several different occasions, uncomfortable with the fact that you can hear her sleep talking. So I'm going to go with a no, because she very obviously does not want him to take into account the things that she says while she's sleeping.
Stephanie set up a world that is almost exactly like our current world. And that's not different enough. And the soulmate lore is not detailed or specific enough to account for this. It's desperately problematic.
Listen, in this economy, talk about consent.
She can't.
Talk about consent.
She can't. She had a decade.
Listen, there's this whole, I am here for a suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
I love Romeo and Juliet. That's my shit. There's a level of suspension of disbelief you have to go in there walking in knowing that you know, they're kind of supposed to be in love, even though they've known each other for a handful of hours.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I can do that. With this book, it's just a little bit too, it's just a leap and a bound too far into the soulmate realm for me to really be able to suspend my disbelief about it. And it gives Edward a lot of excuses sort of trample a lot of boundaries, because he knows that they are, you know, tied to one another on a destiny level.
Yeah. Well, it would be perfectly fine if that was like a true mechanic of your world and your story, which like Stephanie kind of does try to set up, because in this book, I believe she does say it's like when you fall in love, it's like the first time you are experiencing it at the age that you're at. And Edward says a lot of the time, like, that's why now I'm a different person. Like, love is what changes the vampires. But that's one-sided. It's completely one-sided, and we're dealing with a 17-year-old mortal girl.
Kind of like how imprinting is one-sided. And
yeah. It's always one-sided on the guy's side. I mean, obviously not, because Alice and Esme and Rosalie exist. So it's if that was a thing, and Edward was constantly talking about like, and also had like let Bella in on that mechanic of the world, I would, and also if Edward were less insufferable ever in his own head, I could probably suspend my disbelief for this, because I'm with you. I'm not like, it doesn't have to be rainbows and roses and like perfectly. I mean, we can read messed up stuff and I'll totally buy into it, but you have to make it convincing. Mm-hmm. And this is just too much like two regular people.
Yeah. Yeah. So we go from that to basically the Rosalie and Edward scene. That's the kind of next major jump here, where Edward goes and tries to convince Rosalie to not attack Bella and to not hate Bella, because Bella is part of like their world now, and like she just has to accept it without even like trying to understand at all why she's upset and why she hates Bella. Like, he just like assumes so much about Rosalie that it doesn't give her any chance to like justify her actions. Like, she's pissed off for a valid reason in her own mind. It may not be the right reason or whatever the right is, I guess, but like she has a reason to hate or a reason to feel like this anger and this like disdain. And they don't give her a chance to voice that until after Edward's already like put all this judgment and all this like hate upon Rosalie. And then he never goes back and is like, oh man, I was wrong to think that. Like, I get it now. Let me treat her better. He's just like, oh, I have to put up with Rosalie again, or I'm going to protect Bella from Rosalie. And like, no.
I want to know exactly what purpose Rosalie serves in this narrative.
I think she's just the only one to vote no for like vampirism, and like I think she's supposed to be like, this is what you could have, the key to that, but it wasn't solidified enough. There wasn't any moment where we got to really like invest in Rosalie and really care about the things that she lost to the extent that she cared about it, because we didn't get to see any of that. We just got to see her like hardship and her and her hate. If Stephanie had gone back and like fleshed out Rosalie a little bit more and given Edward a chance to see why, we would have had a better Rosalie to connect with in Breaking Dawn, when she's like obsessively taking care of Bella and making sure that the baby is safe, because the baby is like the one thing that Rosalie like really, really wanted but could never have. But now there's this like hybrid vampire baby in this world that like exists and is gonna be part of their family to raise, and this is her chance to like make right again. And it would have been a better connection, but instead it just kind of fuels the whole hate on Rosalie, and like we see her like choosing the baby over Bella's life all the time kind of thing, which I don't think is also true. Like I don't think that's her actual like MO, but like they just put that upon her and they're like assuming like Rosalie will kill Bella if it means saving the baby. Like, and I don't think that's necessarily the case. I don't think she'll immediately be like, oh man, Bella's coughing, gotta kill her to get that baby out, you know?
We don't get a chance to, if there is a side of Rosalie that is that, she's never given the light of day. No. I am bothered that Stephanie has this very interesting argument. This Bella is giving up mortality and that's a big deal and maybe she should think a little bit more about that. It's an interesting argument to make, but she's wrapping it in this character that she has insisted is selfish, vain, shallow, rude, and not much else. And it's not...
You forgot Cars.
Oh, but she's in a Cars.
You're right.
Like, she's such a shallow character, and there are so few good, relatable qualities about Rosalie. You just sort of immediately negate any argument that Rosalie could make because of the character that's created for her.
I get so frustrated because I think Rosalie and Jasper, if you take out the incredibly problematic stuff about Jasper, had so much potential, and it makes me sad. And Seth, you bring up a very interesting point where you were like, it doesn't really fit her MO as a character, and I 100% think you're right. And it, again, falls to this Stephanie syndrome that I like to call Stephanie just says stuff and then thinks it will be true. Yeah. And then doesn't really ever, like, my most specific example of this is Bella and Alice's friendship. And obviously Bella and Alice are always friendly, and you see Alice like playing dress up or like throwing her a party or giving her gifts, and that's all great. But I remember, and I think it's actually somewhere in Midnight Sun, sorry if this is ahead of chapter 20, there's a moment where Edward's like, I saw in Alice's visions that they would be like cuddled up together in each other's confidence.
Yeah.
Where in any of the books, any of the movies, does that ever happen? There's never a time where they just have a sleepover. There's never a time where Bella ever goes to Alice and is like, I'm dealing with something and I don't know what to do. None of that. And so it's like with Rosalie, I think you're completely right. She's just like saying all of these things that Rosalie will do or does or believes. But then the character that Stephanie has set up is not that at all. And so we're just constantly in a discord.
Stephanie, like, mutes women. Yeah.
Oy.
We get very shallow female characters. It's sad.
We really do love Twilight.
We do, I know.
I want more for it. That's the thing. I want it to be better. The world building is great. The lore has potential. There's just sexism built in and racism built in. And I want more for this saga. I want more for it.
So now we're back in Bella's room. And she's still sleeping, but then she wakes up, freaks out because Edward's not there, but he's in his rocking chair and he spooks her or whatever. They have their moment on the rocking chair. And then
he rocks her like a baby right before he plays her a lullaby. Isn't that lovely? Don't you love this? He's 100 and something years old. Anyway.
Yeah, we're not gonna look at that very closely.
We cannot think about it for too long.
But then he remembers that she's human and needs to eat. So they go and make breakfast downstairs. And Bella is like, okay, now watch me hunt. And then goes to make cereal.
This is your favorite.
Yeah. No, I love it. She's like, I fend for myself pretty well. Watch me hunt. And then she grabs a bowl, pours some cereal and milk into it, and Edward says, it was enlightening and alluring to watch her in her element. I hadn't seen her this confident and at ease before. It was clear she could have located everything she was looking for while wearing a blindfold. First, a bowl. And then, stretching up on her toes, a box of off-brand Cheerios from a high shelf. This is so much. And the true crime to me is I don't think this is the book making fun of itself.
No.
I really don't. I think this is totally sincere.
This is such a disservice to Bella, who's like, maybe one thing that she is good at is cooking. Like, if he wanted to say that, watch her make some eggs Benedict.
Yeah.
Like, she could have.
Yeah. Really, it's insulting. It is truly
insulting. Stephanie, you have insulted your protagonist.
Yeah. And then, oh God, okay. And then they go and meet Edward's family.
Right.
Okay, but I do want to say, and it's an absolute crime that we don't get anything about that khaki skirt in this book. I am devastated. In the original Twilight, she put on that long khaki skirt
and a high pony, don't forget.
And Edward was like, you look too tempting in that khaki skirt. And we didn't get any of his. He just was like, didn't even process the skirt.
Yeah, which we know he would have, because he spent all of like a whole chapter talking about some fugly sweater that she was wearing. And like,
the sweater!
It was so much hate.
I was the first one of my friends that read this book, and I was like, I texted them and I was like, I genuinely cannot believe how much I'm hearing about this sweater. I'm losing my mind.
Yeah.
Well, it's truly insulting. I mean, if we're gonna get to what's really offensive about it, he's basically like, I'm so glad she's wearing this ugly giant sweater so that I won't be tempted by her skin. Excuse me.
But then the tempting long khaki skirt, it doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't.
You haven't experienced the right khaki skirt yet.
I don't think it would make a difference.
It doesn't exist. It does not exist.
No, you know what? I think I'm with Seth. Now, khaki chinos, totally different topic.
So we got to go to the house now. Everything's pretty like standard. We get to hear a lot more about like Esme and like how she like immediately just loves Bella because of how Edward is like glowing or whatever. And that's nice to see, but then like we don't get that much of it. And then Edward goes to the piano and plays, and Bella is like enthralled by this. And she starts to cry. And this may be my like favorite horrible like worst thing that Edward does. He takes the tear from Bella's cheek, looks at it, and then licks it. Which in Twilight, I was like, okay, sexy, question mark? But then you hear what's going on in Edward's head, where he describes like the molecular like biology of vampire cells and how only blood goes through, so that when that tear goes into his stomach, it will stay there forever. And so he will always have a part of her in him. And I think that's just the most disturbing part of this
That
book.
might be the most heterosexual thing I've ever heard. Edward, think about your life choices.
It's just as bad as like him playing her lullaby with the bottle cap on the piano. Do you remember that part? He takes out the bottle cap that reminds him of her, and he sets it on the piano thing, and then he plays it while looking at the bottle cap.
Yeah.
Sarah, give me a break.
Yeah.
God, I love this series.
I wrote right next to it in like the little margins, I put, are you Kirby? Like absorbing her essence.
Or Yoshi. Like,
Yoshi.
it's just like...
I want to take a brief like little interlude to talk about the overusage of italics that Stephanie uses. And not the italics of like
Yes.
like Edward thinking about what other people are thinking. Not those. But the ones that make it read like a high school community theater production of Annie. Like those italics. And if you turn you're in your hymnals to page 418, fourth paragraph down, I use the term paragraph loosely because one of them is just the word Rosalie. In the last sentence, but I would miss her for even this short interlude.
No,
that wasn't necessary. The I and her, like,
but that's what this is. This is Twilight is in so many ways fan fiction and community theater of itself, and that's both beautiful and also what's going on.
And it's on pretty much every page, this italics thing.
And as soon as you notice it, you can't unsee it. And then Bella goes up to Carlisle's study with Edward, and they talk forever. Or, well, no, actually, they skip over, like, most of the Carlisle stuff. And we go into this...
They do, that was surprising.
Yeah, and then we go into this whole, like, storytelling time with Edward about this one time where he has mixed emotions about killing this almost pedophile. And the fact that, like, his emotions were even mixed to begin with, when, like, we see the whole story through Edward's eyes, and we see, like, the guy, like, plotting, and then going back on his thoughts, and then plotting again, and then almost acting on his thoughts. And then Edward's like, technically, he's still innocent because he didn't do the crime, but, like, no, because he was about to do it before you killed him. Whatever. If you're going to be this vigilante hero, this Batman, which you are now, I guess, like,
he's Batman.
Be Batman, and don't worry about killing this almost pedophile. And Stephanie, stop writing weird things about children.
Oh, yeah.
Leave the children alone. This book is so dark. It really is. Edward is Batman. It's all about what he thinks will make him a good person, and in doing so makes him oblivious.
Yeah, and I think that really goes back to, like, Edward's quest for his soul, that I think like she wants to write, but she doesn't commit enough to write it, but just allude to it every once in a while. Like, Edward's worried about his soul, but, like, you can't just say that and make it a thing in the book. Like, you have to set it up more and then actually develop it. I would love to hear Edward's thoughts about, like, how because he's doing these things, he's hoping that, like, his soul is safe, and then something happens. I don't know. I feel like that would have been slightly more interesting than, like, the will they, won't they, that he does in his own head when, like, he knows that she yells Edward in the middle of the night like 20 times.
It's like a puzzle piece that doesn't fit into the rest of the saga. So we have this story about this 5-year-old child that almost gets murdered. But then we also have the story earlier about the guy who almost kidnapped Bella. I mean, there's so much in the book that's unnecessarily bleak that we don't really get a warning for. And at the end of the day, this is a series that is it's a series of romance novels. So it's kind of, I don't know, like, make it about morality or make it a romance novel. But this,
you could do both, but I don't think Stephanie can.
You could do both, but it just isn't working. I mean, whatever's going on here is not working. So the story about the little girl is out of place, unnecessarily bleak, and changes nothing about the plot.
Yeah.
Well, I think you make an interesting point that it's too bleak, and I think maybe you could have some of this, like, we see bleakness in Edward's perspective if the A-plot romance wasn't already really bleak. Like, when do Bella and Edward ever smile? Like, they don't. They're always sad.
Yeah.
Even when it's not new moon, they're always just like, oh my goodness, I love you. He literally says, Bella, will you marry me? Dead face. Which, like, checks out for Edward. But if you had Bella be like this, like, cinnamon roll light character that doesn't know anything of this dark world, and when he's with her is literally the Persephone to his Hades, you could maybe pull that off.
Yeah.
But instead, we just have dark, really dark.
Yeah. And I want to end it on that. I want to end it on that puzzle piece that doesn't fit. Persephone and Hades, that whole, like, story that she's trying to, like, elude Edward and Bella to, when she's already set up all the other stuff in Twilight. You can't just throw in that mythology all of a sudden. Like, and then
if you're Stephanie, you can try.
And then she shoves it down our throats. Like, she actively, like, every chapter, she's like, oh, and then the pomegranate is here, and the pomegranate resurfaces, and I am in hell, and Persephone is gone for the spring, and like, shut up, Edward.
It truly feels like she thought of the book cover first and then tried to make it work.
Yeah.
No, that's I guarantee you that's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I fully believe it doesn't work because every single one of your readers is going in knowing the end of the story.
Yeah.
Should we talk about something that we did like from these chapters?
Oh yeah, what's one thing that we did like?
We should end on something we did like, yes.
I did like this moment right at the very end of chapter 20, where Alice and Jasper walk in on them kind of like wrestling around. And Edward can tell that Jasper is just like eating up the energy in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's just like loving just the pure joy in the room because there's so little of it in his day-to-day life. And I did like that moment a lot. We get these tiny, tiny moments with Jasper that are so few and far between that I think are really lovely.
Mm-hmm.
I wish he were better constructed as a character, but these tiny moments we get with him I think are really lovely.
Yeah, the Jasper that's in my head, that's not a Confederate soldier. And also, I just have more backstory with the whole vampire army. Again, in my head, that moment makes a ton of sense. Because Jasper was emotionally abused by Maria, which again, why you gotta make all your POCs like this? And it would make sense that, one, why he ends up with Alice. I think that checks out. And two, why he, like, that moment of him being desperate for those, like, genuinely pure and wonderful moments fits in with a person that was emotionally abused and kind of, like, was also, like, dealing with war for years and years and years. And has obviously not seen a therapist because every single Cullen and Swan needs one.
Yeah. Balke, do you have a moment that you like that you want to share?
I love the image of Rob in a rocking chair.
Do we like that?
Listen, it's awful, but you imagine out of context Rob in a rocking chair.
Sure.
There you go.
But I know the context that
no, but if we ignore the context and just imagine Rob
look past
in a dark corner going, delusion.
Anyway.
I just love the fact that, like, the rocking chair is so far in this dark corner that whenever anyone is in the room, like, he's invisible. Like, he's some rogue in a D&D campaign that just crits all the time. Like,
yeah, he's a gloom stalker.
Yeah, he really is. So, my favorite part, I think, or not my favorite, but one of the parts that I, like, notated, and I was like, this is interesting. I want to know more. But, of course, Stephanie's not going to give it to me. Is on page 445. It's towards the bottom when he's talking about Carlisle. And he says he's talking about Carlisle's dad, and he led hunts for witches, werewolves, ... and vampires. We know vampires are real. We know werewolves are real. The fact that he added witches, that means witches are in the mythology of the Twilight series and in this universe, and I want to know more about the Twilight witches. Like, give me some of that witch magic.
The witches.
Jessica could be a witch.
Angela should be a witch, and Angela and Bella should end up together.
Yes. Make it gay.
Make it gay.
Make it gay.
Yeah.
Make it gay 2020.
Exactly. Well, thank you all so much for being here and for talking about this wonderful series with me. Thank you, viewers, for watching this. If you want us to continue to talk about the rest of the chapters in this book, let us know. Leave a comment below. Like, subscribe. If you want us to do another book next, let me know too. We can definitely take care of some of that. Other things that are coming out on this YouTube channel, we're going to have some gaming, some different cooking challenges with air fryers, and just a lot more awesome content as I figure out what the TolkienGay voice is. So just peruse at your leisure and follow me on Twitter, and you know what to do, you know? All right, goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.